under the jaundiced bulb above my workbench. The garage smelled like old belts and rained on plywood. And the fan that never pointed where you wanted it clicked at the same spot in its rotation. A patient, nagging sound. That was where I stood the first time I admitted to myself that I had already shifted something inside that could not be shifted back. Name's Ansel Breaux, 65 come April. Retired from the state survey crew after 4 decades walking ditch lines and bayou edges with a transit over one shoulder and a sack lunch smashed to a rectangle. Cecile, my wife, keeps a small cushion under her knees now and a heating pad tucked by her chair. 41 years married, and we have more recipes than conversations. She used to dance barefoot to Clifton Chenier in the kitchen while a pot of something bubbled. Now she reads the ingredient list aloud because her fingers can't always grip a jar. And asks me to check the salt like it's a password. It's not a sad house. Just quiet in a way that swallows the color out of the day. Mireille arrived in that quiet like you crack a window you didn't notice was painted shut. Baton Rouge girl, 38 by her telling, hair pulled into a loose knot that never stayed. Gold crucifix catching the light when she bent to pick up dropped mail. She'd say, "Pass me that, share," and I would. Feeling ridiculous for liking the way the old endearment warmed a corner of me I'd let go cold. Twice a week at first, then every so often she texted if she could swap days because her aunt needed driving to a cataract check or her car threw a code light. I said yes too quickly, then pretended I had to rearrange something to make it seem like effort. She noticed everything. The hedges cut down to something a neighbor would complain about. The LSU cap I wore even when baseball season disappointed everybody again. The days I set my coffee down full and walked away. "You eat?" she'd ask, not scolding, just taking stock. Later, I'd say, and she'd slide a plate closer. Something simple she'd wrapped for herself, boudin from High Nabor, a scoop of rice. A wedge of tomato, as if it were nothing to share. It's an odd hunger, the kind that isn't for food. You don't feel it roaring, you notice it in the way your shoulders ease when a person says your name the way it ought to be said, with interest and not obligation. With a tiny lift at the end like a question you're invited to answer at your own pace. Cecile knows my name, of course. And uses it to ask for the ladder or the blue bottle of ibuprofen or to tell me the church bulletin says our pew's row captain needs help with the gumbo booth. We are a dependable pair. We are also living like hands holding either end of a rope too gently to tug. It began stupidly. I offered her a glass of sweet tea the first week because the heat made the corners of the ceiling sweat and even the dog picked the tile over the rug. She leaned on the counter, wrist wet from wringing a rag, and told me her ex still left tools on her stoop when he heard something rattle in her car. Then vanished again before she could say thank you. I told her about survey days on the Atchafalaya spillway. The way fog eats the sun so completely you think the day never started. She laughed, quick and dry, not polite. A real sound. After that I found reasons to be in rooms she was in. As if sockets and filters suddenly required same-day attention. Not proud of that. Also not going to lie about it. Boundaries existed, in spoken, then spoken to myself. Don't text outside scheduling. Don't linger. Don't compliment anything that can be worn. Don't touch except to hand off a towel or a bag of trash. A man can build fences all day and then climb one without admitting he planned to. The marriage wasn't bad, that would be too easy. We had weathered worse. Cecile's mother, a storm that took the roof off the back room. My brother's oilfield accident, small griefs that turned into routines. We prayed before meals. We kept a jar where we folded slips of paper with words like, Thanksgiving. Roof held this season, and Dr. Patel says inflammation down. You don't leave a woman who has packed your hospital bag twice without complaint. You don't even consider it. But there are departures that happen in place. The way a river moves past a piling that never budges. One afternoon, rain practiced without committing, dark sky. Nothing falling, and Cecile dozed with the TV low. A cooking show where a man with perfect hair sprinkled parsley the way people sprinkle holy water. Mireille had been on her knees behind the stove, muttering about the folly of men who design kitchens without hips in mind, and stood to wash her hands. You don't gotta cut the hedges today, she said. Seeing the clippers I'd hauled in and never used. Storm's only pretending, I told her. Like a child who learned how to cry to see who'll look. Ha! You always talk pretty like that? It embarrassed me, the suggestion that I did anything like talk pretty. But it pleased me worse. She reached for the glass I was holding to move it aside. And our fingers met. A small accident, I could have made of it. Could have let go, could have laughed. Could have exaggerated a clumsy drop to scold myself safe. Instead, the world compressed into that soft ridge below her thumb. The damp cool of condensation, the absence of sound I noticed because the refrigerator chose that second to stop humming, and I didn't let go. Her eyes flicked to mine, not coy. Cautious. Curious, maybe. I kissed her. No thunder crashed on cue. No choir sang. My mouth was dry and hers tasted faintly of orange Tic Tac and something soapy. And when she didn't move at first, I thought I had ruined her job, my standing. Maybe the last good piece of myself. Then she answered, brief as a tap on the shoulder, and stepped back. Ansel, she said, with that lift again, except it wasn't a question now. It was a naming of what had just been done. Heat rose in my neck. That old army jacket of mine on its hallway hook might as well have been a witness. If you have ever touched a hot pot even after telling yourself not to, you know the little thrill of pain and the quick glance to see if anyone saw you be that foolish. That was me, except the only witness was her and the dog, who thumped his tail as if kissed people in kitchens every afternoon. I shouldn't have, I said, which was almost nothing. The weakest language in a house full of words we'd used up years ago. She stood with her damp hands mid-air, then wiped them on a towel slowly, buying time. Your wife is in that chair, she said, not whispering. Cecile is sleeping, I said, as if the verb removed the fact. We stood like our shoes had been glued to the floor. Far down the block, a garbage truck clattered and a man hollered. And then the refrigerator kicked back to life and the moment scraped itself into an ordinary afternoon shape, except the air didn't buy the disguise. A tremor started in my right hand, small enough to hide if I tucked it into a pocket. I'm not built for foolishness, Mr. Breaux, she said finally. The Mr. came back, a little shield. Me either, I told her. And it came out like a vow delivered 2 months late. Silence, except for the television showing a roast being salted by a stranger. From the living room, Cecile murmured something and shifted. The heating pad clicked as the setting cycled. Every good reason I had not to step where I'd just stepped bloomed in a circle. Church. Neighbors, our son who lives in Lake Charles and calls on Thursdays, the jar of thank yous. The way Cecile keeps a list of people to pray for folded into her Bible like receipts. I could see all of it and still felt a pull I had mocked in other men for being weak. I'm sorry. I tried again, and it landed with the same thin sound. I clean, she said, picking up her bag. I leave. She wasn't angry. Something worse. Careful. Mireille, I said, and saying her name out loud sounded like handing her a small thing wrapped in paper. She took a breath that lifted the chain at her throat. Maybe you talk to your wife, she said, not unkind, then shook her head. Not about me. About y'all. She put her shoes back on by the mat. The ones with laces stained from pine sol and parking lot dust. And I stood stupid with a glass in my hand, sweating onto the counter. There's nothing to talk about, came out of me, automatic. A defense I'd worn so long it had become a jacket in summer. Then why you kiss a stranger in her kitchen? She didn't wait for me to answer because I didn't have one that wasn't the kind a teenager would make. She left by the side door where the hinges stick in damp weather. And the dog trotted after her to the gate as if escorting a guest who had stayed too long. When the gate clicked, I set the glass down, too hard, and sweet tea leapt over the rim. A brown crescent on the tile. I wiped it with a dishcloth I didn't deserve to touch. Then tossed the cloth into the sink and stared at the drain like it could swallow the piece of me I didn't want. In the hallway mirror, a trick of a mirror that lives to catch you sideways, I saw a man who looks like my father at the age he died. The same slump at the shoulder from habits learned carrying weight. The house went on with its small noises. The AC breathed. A motorcycle passed on airline highway. Somewhere a mockingbird practiced somebody else's song. I walked to the living room and stood watching Cecile. The heating pad cord made a neat loop to the outlet. Her breath hitched and settled, and her hands, that curl now even when she sleeps, were folded on her lap like church hands. I could have woken her and told the truth that would scorch every room we live in. I could have gone to the garage and turned the fan toward me and let it click off beat while I rehearsed a better man's speech. Instead I sat on the edge of the ottoman and waited for the logic to return, the one where I am dependable, where Mireille is a name on the calendar and not a taste in my mouth, where a kiss is not a hinge the day swings on. The logic stayed gone. The door chime sounded, two soft notes we picked because the other choices were too cheerful, and I flinched like a boy caught doing what he knows he shouldn't. The dog barked once. Cecile stirred. I looked to the door and saw a shape through the glass, blurred by the pattern we chose to keep the afternoon from looking in. A silhouette with a brim. Not Mireille. Not our son. The brim meant a neighbor or a deacon or the lawn guy or a woman selling magazines. Anyone and everyone whose eyes did not need to know my mouth had just done what it had done. Cecile's eyelids lifted. Who's that, Ansel? She asked, voice sleep thick. I stood, heart punching, and in the instant between her question and my answer, I understood that crossing a line is not one move but a length of road. And I had already gone farther down it than I like to think. I walked to the door, jaw set, hand on the knob, tasting orange and soap and something of my own cowardice, and pulled it open.